Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to GlugNet. Tonight we have a presentation by David Cobb, who will be talking to us on the advantages of being an Azure Cloud Generalist. A little bit about us. We are the Greater Lansing user group for .NET developers, based out of Okemos, Michigan, as pictured there in the map. Our meetings are free and open to the public to attend. They're held every third Thursday of the month from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. The best way to find out about new meetings is if you join our meetup page, meetup.com/glugnet. I am also starting to put them out on social media as well, so you can find out when our meetups are from there. But this is going to be the best way to find past meetups and future meetups as well. We'd also like to take a moment to thank our sponsors this evening. NIS Technologies, represented here by Sam Nasser, for providing the virtual meeting space as well as recording capabilities for this meeting. The .NET Foundation, who helps us pay some of our bills. And TechSmith, our normal in-person hosting site. And we hope to be back in person with them very soon. We are in contact with them, and we're going to see when we can get back in person again. As I mentioned, meetups are recorded and posted to YouTube by Sam. A link to his channel is there, as well as a QR code. So if you want to watch past events, that's the place to do it. During tonight's presentation, if you have a question, feel free to jump off of mute and ask your question, or if our presenter David has a question out to us and is looking for answers, feel free to answer him. Otherwise, we just ask that you please remain muted so everybody else can hear and enjoy the presentation. If you do not feel comfortable speaking up, but you still have a question, there is a chat feature in GoToMeeting. I will monitor that and interrupt as we get questions coming in. So that's also a good way to do it. At the conclusion of tonight's presentation, there will be a brief survey made available to all attendees. All the feedback we collect is anonymous, and a summary of that is provided to our speakers so that they can improve their presentations for other groups. So if you would please be so kind as to fill that out after the presentation, we would be very appreciative of that. Some other meetups that you might be interested in other than GlugNet, our friends at the .NET Study Group will be meeting on November 16th. They are currently going over fundamentals of Azure. So if that sounds interesting to you, the link is there, or you could talk to Sam, that is his group. And coming up in the Cleveland C# VBNet user group, Docker with .NET apps. The link is provided as well there. And now time for our feature presentation.
Yes, thanks everybody. So advantages of being a cloud generalist. So this actually started as a conversation with Joe Kunk. So you get some credit for this, or I don't know. I'll take the blame. You can have the credit if it goes well. I'll take the blame if it doesn't, because we're kind of going for something new, something a little different. I'm usually teaching just about the technology. Now this time, this presentation, I'm going to be talking kind of bigger picture, kind of stepping back and thinking about your career and the way that you approach working with technology. And this is me. This is me and my family. We were in England over the summer. That's the eye behind us, and got a chance to travel. Things starting to open up a little bit over the summer. Really enjoyed going out there. I think it's a good picture and good introduction. But I kind of want to start further back in this. I don't know where everybody is in their career, but I wonder if you think about where you got started. I've been kind of retrospective recently and thinking about how I got here and what were the factors, what were the things that brought me here. I originally went to school. I'm from right now I live in Boca Raton, Florida, but I went to school up in Clarence, New York, outside of Buffalo. This is me graduating, and I was really, really happy to get out of high school. I did not enjoy it very much. I moved around a lot, and I was really very shy, really introverted kid. I really liked computers. That helped me. When I went to school, I got a chance to go to University of Florida. This is where my folks went, my parents, and both met at University of Florida. So I went there, go Gators, and it was a really good school for me. I had a lot of challenges, I think, figuring out what I wanted to do. I went to originally the engineering school and switched majors. I got into the business school because of calculus. I didn't like calculus, but the thing that I was really good at was computers, and I had no idea. I was kind of lost as I got closer to the end of my college career. I was really kind of trying to figure out what was I going to be doing. I knew I was good with computers, but I didn't really know, where I was going. And something happened in my first job, my first tech job out of school, that kind of set me off in a certain direction. And I had an opportunity to work for a temp agent. Temp agency found me an opportunity to say, "Hey, David, I know you're a computer information science major. Can you manage a network that's running Novell NetWare?" And after a weekend of reading the book, I got that from the Books A Million. This is way back in the day where you got books, big thick books, and over that weekend I read everything I could. And after that, I was the Novell NetWare administrator. So I was subbing in for somebody that went on vacation, and I showed up and I was able to do the job and get people working. But there was a crisis. This was one of my first jobs, and this was kind of an overwhelming experience when the network lost connectivity between the workstations, and I had a extreme dread, extreme feelings of panic. This was one of my first jobs, and I really scrambled. I had to run around with floppy disks, moving files. They were doing architectural work, and they had Lotus 123, and we were moving files around. Eventually, I was able to reboot and bring some things back up, and I got things going. But things got interrupted, and there was a crisis. But I did my best to keep them working. And I thought that they would be very mad with me, but it turned out they were thrilled. Even though there was a crisis, even though something went wrong, I was able to keep them working. And I can't tell you what kind of impact that had on me. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was good with computers, but not so much else. And this was a kind of a pivotal moment for me, because I realized, hey, I'm good at this. People need me to do this, and I can help. I can earn my way. I can earn my living. This is something I have value. This is what I can do. I can help people with computers. And this was one of these pivotal moments for me in my career. And I wonder if you think about your career, how you got to where you are. Think about the challenges. Think about the things that maybe happened to you, or maybe you sought out those challenges. And maybe think about, how did those things change your life? So I had, from there, other opportunities, doing tech support over the phone. I remember supporting MS-DOS when they had 640K. I was working for a software company that their software needed 560K. And so I had to use MemMaker and tools and work with batch autoexec.bat and configsys to make things work on that machine, on that computer, and doing help desk work. I got into web development. HTML was the thing to learn, and I picked up something called Cold Fusion. But all of these things, and as I explored the different technologies, I had a chance to kind of pivot and realize, hey, all these websites have SQL servers behind them. I wonder if Cold Fusion is really going to be around, but I know this SQL Server is probably pretty important. I think this is going to be around for a while. And I went after my MC DBA. There's 4 tests you have to take. I studied at a boot camp. I borrowed money. I went after a 2-week boot camp and dove in with 20 other people. And I was able to pass 4 exams and become a Microsoft Certified Database Administrator. And then that opened the door to teach. And while I was good with the technology and just natural, I like learning, I like exploring new tech, I love figuring things out. The part about dealing with people was harder for me, and I was really nervous. I knew it was a good thing for me to do. I knew it was a challenge I wanted to take on that would be good for my career, but I was scared to do it. And actually, sometimes that scaredness still comes back. There's even though I would teach a class, over and over for I don't know, throughout my career, there would be moments where that fear would come back, like sound of stage fright, kind of nervousness. And it took a long time for the butterflies to go away in that beginning of the class. But after we started talking about technology, and I was realizing, hey, this is good. People actually want to hear what I have to say. Hey, I'm actually helpful, and if I can figure out the answer, I can be useful to people. Then I become comfortable and I enjoy it. Start talking about technology. So becoming a teacher, becoming a Microsoft certified trainer was just another pivotal moment for me. I got, over the years, I've taken and passed a lot of certification exams, and that comes in as important later on as we talk about keeping up these days with the cloud. But this is back in the day with SQL Server and Windows networking and Windows Active Directory, and even some .NET development certifications I went after back in the day. And I really just love the challenge of learning and diving in and figuring out a new technology, and then working with tests. And I got really good at this. And I know that a lot of people are intimidated by certifications. There's a fear of, oh, hey, what if I take this and fail? Or hey, maybe this is too hard for me, and maybe I just want to learn the technology. Maybe I don't want to test. But I would just assure anyone who's trepidatious about that anybody can learn this. Anybody can learn how to be good at these things. Anybody can learn to be good at these tests. Over the years, I got certified on multiple SQL servers, multiple versions. And there's this thing that happens when you teach. There's this thing that happens where people perceive you differently. Even though you may not know everything, just because you're talking about something as a teacher, as a trainer, the assumption goes out there, oh, you must be an expert. And that, even though I may not know everything that they think, there's that perception. And a lot of times, I'd say, hey, that's not my area, or I'd say, hey, I don't know, but I can find out. And but that opened up doors. That gave me a lot of opportunity in my life to be able to. I got hired by a former student. I was able to work at University of Miami. I got hired by companies that were doing consulting work because I was a trainer. That opened up opportunities for me. And so my motto these days is learn, do, and teach. And I would just encourage anybody in technology, anybody that's hearing, that's going to be one of my themes here, is being able to pick something up, do that work, and then teaching it to other people is really a way to give back and also to grow in what you do. And I'll talk a lot more about this. So this teaching is a foundational skill. Because I'm learning to teach, because I'm going through the certification, because I'm then teaching it to other people, this muscle of picking up technology, keeping up with check changes, teaching hands-on to people, and being able to solve the problems that come up, supporting things when things don't go well. Somebody's SQL server doesn't start, the script doesn't run, there's a syntax error, something wrong with a virtual machine or a lab environment or a network connection. All those things that can come up. When those things come up, solving them can actually be a way to actually teach. Hey, this is what broke. Here's how I figured it out. Here's the error message. And that becomes a teachable moment. So taking things that when they don't work and turning them into something valuable, that was another skill that I picked up. And as you'll see, that's something that helps down the road. So since then, I had a lot of chances to teach, and it was in the context of my other work. Definitely challenging, guys. It's definitely rewarding as well. So if anybody, it's not necessarily easy, but some of you may have that bug. Maybe some of you may be teaching already in your work. If you are teaching, if anybody does teaching or training, let me know in the chat. I'm curious to know as part of your work, or maybe maybe you're volunteering, maybe you're giving it away somehow. But that teaching, that giving back, kind of connects the dots for me. And it's nice to see when you are able to help somebody see the light, the light come on, when they get it, they learn it. Excellent. Yeah, that's good. And that satisfaction that you get, yeah, the mentoring, I think, is probably these days, especially with the cloud and the way things are moving so rapidly, a lot of learning is on the go and in the context of the workplace. Yes, that's it. This as a sneak preview here, being able to teach or being able to communicate about technology is one of the unlocks for being able to be a generalist, because it makes learning so much more effective. So, transferring forward, they came out with a PowerShell plugin for SQL in 2012, and I just got completely enamored. I thought, hey, there's this technology that I can use to script and automate things, but it talks to all these different other systems. I can use it with SQL, I can use it with Windows, I can use it with SharePoint, I can use it with all these other tools. There's modules to work with things like Exchange, and I just realized, hey, this is really fantastic. This is fascinating. And I actually had chances to teach using that tool as well. I think it's PowerShell administration. And I was never always a full-time trainer. I would pick this, I would have roles, consulting roles or full-time roles, and I'd be teaching sometimes full-time, but mostly on the side. And fast forward to 2019, at this point I'd gotten a role with a company in Miami, commuting about an hour each way to this role, and a very comfortable role. I've been working with that team for 19, I guess it was about 10 or 15 years. So 2000, it was a side project / client back in 2005, 2006. So it was approaching 15 years, and I was thinking that this was my job. I had a role that I thought I was going to be there for the rest of my career. And I found out in September, I got a call from the CEO and the HR person, and I found out that I would no longer have my full-time job on my income, and 3 months. They gave me 3 months, of warning before I knew that I would lose most of my income. So I kind of had this, I had a ton of responsibility at this point, and it wasn't like it was when I was younger and I took this on. I was able to train and kind of do this, take more risks. And I'm thinking, well, am I going to go out and get another job? Hey, I'm 49 years old. Do I want to do more DBA work or PowerShell work? It wasn't really that exciting to me anymore. I was dabbling with the cloud. I investigated Azure, taken some like pre-release tests, but our company wasn't really into the cloud. And there was little projects coming in to work with the cloud, and I would raise my hand and say, I tried these things, but I was interested in it, but I just thought, I'm 49 and I'm just kind of playing with the cloud. Why would anybody hire me for this? But I really liked Azure. I really thought it was fascinating, and but I just didn't know how I could make this work. I didn't really know how to make that transition to be working in the cloud. And I'm going to skip ahead. I'm going to jump ahead. That was the end of 2019. So actually, coming up on 3 years ago, just a little over 3 years ago. And these days I'm working from home. I haven't had to go to the office. I haven't had to do the commute. I think I've been to one client meeting since then. I've had my own business now, teaching. I'm a freelance trainer. So I teach other people's customers primarily. I don't, a couple times I've gotten my own customers and taught them directly. So I serve other learning partners as a freelance trainer, and about 2 to 3 weeks a month. And then the remaining time I'm filling in with Azure work or some SQL support work for companies and their customers. And I got to the other side of this valley or chasm of making this leap from one thing to another, from one role to another. And maybe some of you are familiar with that, looking over that kind of cliff. Hey, can I get from here where I'm comfortable? Maybe I'm not so happy, but I've got a role that I'm comfortable with. Can I get over to something else? Can I go do something else? And right now I'm basically paid to learn. I play with this technology and go learn what's interesting to me, and I help people with that. And it's a satisfying way to make a living. It's really great. It's a lot of work. It's really challenging, but as I look back, and now that I got here, I'm trying to think, well, how would I show somebody else how to do this? Like the circumstances that I went through to get here, how would I package that for somebody else? How would I give somebody guidance to get here? And Joe kind of inspired me to put this conversation together. And this is an attempt to share what I think are the most important factors to get here. So anybody who's looking to expand their capabilities, to become an Azure full-time cloud person, even a cloud generalist, be able to work in multiple technologies and kind of explore what's interesting to you. I'm hoping you'll find this useful and you get a chance to do kind of the work that you love in the Azure cloud. So here's what I'm trying to do here. Here's my goals, and you can let me know in the form and the feedback that Joe shares, how well I do this, and I really do want to hear from you. But I want you to see the cloud from a different perspective. I want to see learning this and working in this from another perspective. And all of this stuff that's happened to me over nearly 20 years since it's a little over 20 years since I got the MCT. I'm trying to distill that. And I want you to be able to figure out what your strengths are and how do you leverage them for your cloud career. Where do you want to focus? And this is maybe one of the most important things. And what do you want to filter out? Where do you want to put your focus, and what do you want to filter out? And I want to inspire you to share what you know. And because you're here in a user group, you're familiar. People that are sharing what they know with the community. Maybe you get a chance to share what you know and get paid for it. But being inspired to share what you know, it all starts somewhere. And as you share what you know, you grow more capable with people and with computers. But this is an experiment. I am typically teaching technology, and I'm not teaching process or anything like this big picture approach. So it's an attempt to do something new and distill what I have and share that with you. So under construction for sure. I need you to, two things. I want you to open up a text editor or be able to write down. I'm going to ask some questions. I'll show up in yellow, big yellow. I want you to think. I'm trying to inspire you to think about where you are in your career, where you might want to go, and maybe challenge your thinking on things. So be ready to open up a text editor, be able to write down questions. You don't necessarily have to share the answers. This is just for you. But I want to ask questions for each of the sections here. And there's a form link. I'll ask Joe to share that. He already shared it to everyone. So fill this out at the end. I really do want your feedback, and my email's here too. I want to hear from you. What was the most confusing thing? I'm going to be going over a lot of stuff. It might not make sense. I want to hear what doesn't make sense, but what's useful. What do you want to hear more of? Where are you going? What do you want to work towards next? Joe, I know him through the study group. Cecilia of Magna Data down here at the Data Analytics and AI group. She's sponsored a study group for DP 500, the data platform architect certification. So Joe and a group of folks are hard at work studying that and sharing what they know with each other. And I help them get access to lab environments. I love helping people who are ready to learn, people who are motivated and are learning. So I really like to hear from you as well. So why Azure Cloud Generalist? So this this is kind of, I don't know, it goes against conventional wisdom because people think, well, cloud is so big, there's no way you can know everything. Why would you even try to consider being a generalist? And my answer for this is, I borrow a lot. One of those inputs that I have, I really enjoy Tim Ferriss. If you look up Tim Ferriss, specialized or specialist generalist, find this talk he gives, and he is advising you to be a specialized generalist. So, does that make sense? What do you mean spell it? Spell. Let me know specifically what do you mean for the spelling. Tim Ferriss. And I'll share a link here in the slide as well, actually. So actually, I can do this. Can I just copy link? Yeah, I can actually do that. Oops, I sent that to private. Let's see. Love this guy. I really have learned so much from him. He's the guy who originally wrote the 4-Hour Workweek. You may have heard this book a long time ago. And in a nutshell, I mean, you can watch the video, but in a nutshell, he talks about the fact that you should, if you focus on just a very narrow set of things, you don't necessarily, if you set narrow set of skills, you're kind of cutting yourself off from a lot of possibilities. So the key is to pick a set of skills or combination of skills that together they enhance each other. Or so maybe you might not be the best in the world at A or B, but if you know A and B skills, and there's not a lot of people that have that combination, that you can set yourself into a narrow group of people. So you're looking to find skills that you can focus on that are going to open the door to other things. And I think that that's really relevant when it comes to the cloud. So here's a picture from, and there's another link I'm going to share. If you like PDFs that give you guidance about what to learn in Azure and how they structure things, this is a link to, oh boy, I don't know how that happened. I pasted it twice. The Azure Training Journey PDF. And in it, they describe different paths, different career paths for IT pros that are going into the Azure cloud environment. And there's a natural categorization of IT professionals, data pros, and now they looked in AI pros, artificial intelligence as well, and developers into those groups. So you have these 3 different areas of focus, like, hey, you should specialize, you should be an administrator, or you should be a developer, or you should be a data person. So I'm thinking, no, let's if I specialize in a little bit of each of these, if I focus, I learn some administration, I learn some data, I learn some development, right? Now I can, that's a basis, those are kind of foundations of being a generalist and being able to take on anything in the cloud. So I've got a lot of certifications. I can share a transcript if you guys want to. There's a list of the certs over here on the right. I kind of grouped it out by the different categories here. And the blue ones here that I've got highlighted, those are ones that I'm teaching actively. And typically I'll teach one of these every 1 or 2 months. And but the combination of these, I end up having 2 or 3 weeks of work a month just doing training. And I just did Azure administration. I haven't done architect recently. I think that was almost a year ago. It's architecture. And for data, I'm often teaching the database administrator and the data engineer. This is Azure Synapse. So actually the DP500 is something I'm looking at next. That's actually coming up. So the data platform architect involves data engineering with a lot of other pieces, like working with Power BI. They've actually changed this. This is no longer DA100. I think this is PL300. And got into machine learning. Not much machine learning. This is one of the hardest ones, actually. Machine learning was tough. I didn't know a lot of the algorithms and things. There's a whole lot that I knew that I had to learn this one. But I haven't had much chance to teach it, so I'd probably have to catch up with it again. But just fascinating. There's so much going there. And then same thing with AI. And there I kind of put this in with the developer. They have it listed here, data and AI. AI working with this is more like a developer. You're kind of using other systems and plugging them together. So you're hooking into cognitive services and identifying what's in an image, but you kind of use it from a developer perspective. You're consuming these services as a developer. So developer AZ 204 certification, and then DevOps. This is popular, and DevOps is actually one of these. If there was one certification that was a generalist certification, it would be DevOps, because you're combining operations with development, and there's so many tools, not only Azure DevOps tools, but now that they've acquired GitHub, using GitHub Actions and GitHub projects to do automation of your software development process. So if what I'm talking about is interesting to you, and you look at these different technologies, maybe you pick one, or maybe you already have a couple of these. Maybe a couple of these is already your strength, but maybe there's an area here that you're not familiar with. Maybe you know about IT Pro, maybe you know about AZ 104, but maybe not much about development, or development, maybe not much about data. And I would challenge you to think about how could you focus on those other areas that are not your strengths and fill in those gaps, be able to say and be more rounded. And what you find most demand in terms of for training. So for me, actually, AZ 104, this is actually one of the most popular ones, but there's a lot of people that can teach it. So I don't get asked to do it very often. What's keeping me busiest is the data stuff. Apparently they don't have as many people for the database training, so I get those requests a lot. And DevOps and Dev are very intense. Once I had to teach developer, I taught this like 2 weeks in a row. This is most of these are, some of these are like this is a 5-day class. This is for administration now is a 4-day class. Architecture, I think they shortened it. DBA, a lot of times, and I didn't include the fundamental classes here, but there's AZ 900. You guys have a study group that's going to be talking about the storage aspect of AZ 900. Very often when I'm teaching this, I'll teach this with DP 900, which is like database platform fundamentals. And this is, I think this together is 5 days. There's 4 days here and 1 day here. And this one is also 4 days. So that's been what's in demand for me. I found out today that somebody wants me to do the DP 500. I actually don't have that certification yet. So I've got like a month to get that certification. Steve says he got AZ 900 and starting for AZ 204 next year. That's probably one of the more valuable certs, because I think a lot of people are intimidated by it. A lot more folks are going over AZ 104 instead of AZ 204. But I mean, it's a lot of new technologies maybe you've never worked with before. Like a lot of people stumble on like Event Grid, Event Hub, Service Bus, functions and things. But it's fascinating. This is kind of like the way that the things are going to be built in the cloud. VMs is how things used to be done. Virtual machines, Azure, AZ 104 covers VMs. I think AZ 204 is fascinating, but it's a lot of new technology, a lot of things that a lot of people haven't seen before. If you haven't had to work with queues and serverless functions and containers, web apps. So it's a really great introduction. Once you get through AZ 104, especially if you do the hands-on and you build things, you'll find it to be incredibly, you're going to be able to build, you're going to be a cloud native developer. You're building using the tools the way that we're supposed to build things in the cloud, following, creating, it's a bit of a tangent, but there's a cloud pillars. I'm tangenting now. But this concept here of a well-architected framework, and if you look at the way that Azure and this is some degree any cloud. So this is a lot of these principles are borrowed from AWS and then modified and applied to Azure specific things. But when we're building things in the cloud and the different types of workloads that you're using, let's see, there was go to the design principles here. When you're doing things like scaling, when we're working with services, making redundancy, self-healing, a lot of these things are a lot easier to do building things using the Azure development tools as opposed to building it in virtual machines or setting up VM clusters. And setting up this, building things the cloud way is a lot easier once you've gone through that AZ204 and gotten into those cloud native tools. And then also the Azure, the cloud design patterns. A lot of times as I'm talking about those, and I'm just I would say I'm probably, if I had to pick my areas there, I'm probably 40% admin and 40% DBA and maybe 20% dev in terms of my strengths and my time in it. But the understanding these cloud design patterns, when you're doing your AZ204 research, be looking at these patterns here, and you can start with this high level here, like looking at these categories like messaging and looking at these things like publisher, subscriber. What is this about? Why would I use this? And then explains it. Hey, here's how this works. Here's why this is good. You can decouple your different services. It helps you when you're scaling, and maybe one system scales faster than the other. You can use this queue-based load leveling to smooth out the changes between them. And you understand, oh, okay, so that's why I would need this. Okay, that's what message queues are for. All right, that's what event grid is for. And you see it in the context of something that you're building. It helps you to kind of connect the dots. Why am I learning this stuff? So I shared, yeah, that's right, architecture patterns. So, and the docs is just constantly improving. I'm using it all the time, and I'm actually, maybe I should talk about that one. We should have a talk about using the documentation. So, all right, let me jump ahead. So, one of the things, as I laid out in the abstract here, is one of the topics was technology levers. So, I've been kind of alluding to this as I'm talking about this. So, we know a lever, right? We want to multiply our output from a given amount of input. So I'm talking about technology tools, right? So no matter what you're going to be doing, anything you're trying to achieve, you're going to be spending time, you're going to be putting your effort in, your focus, the hard work, the mental work of learning things and applying things, and you're spending money, whether it's your Azure account, whether you're spending on a certification, whether you're spending on a book or a course or a test. These are your resources, and you're putting in the effort. But depending on how you set up the lever, the more leverage you have, right, the more your ability is going to increase. So if you're only able to work, my favorite example, and I'm kind of reading ahead here, but if you're only able to do things with the portal and clicking things with your mouse to do things, as opposed to running a program or running a PowerShell script to do it, then you're giving up that extra ability. So the leverage helps you with your ability to do things, how fast you can pick things up and learn things, and the confidence. So when I made this transition, even though I could go and study for AZ900 and maybe pass the exam for AZ900, I got a chance to teach it. I think it was in February of 2020. I got a chance to teach it. And that was, hey, wow, now I'm going to be teaching Azure. And so everything that I did to prepare, besides reading things and looking at slides, that hands-on work when I was able to do things in a lab and maybe create a script and say, hey, I have a script that works. Like this script sets up a storage account. This script copies things into a storage account. This thing sets up a web server or a VM. And when I created those things, each time I did that, it was like a little step. It's like a little step towards more capability. And we're building our confidence with each thing that we figure out how to do. I keep pressing escape and I keep falling out of my slides. So for me, SQL, that was my first specialty, and focusing on that turned out to be a really good choice. SQL is everywhere. And then when I got into PowerShell in 2012, that also turned out to be okay. And these are giving me leverage, right? I can use these things to get into web design. I can become a DBA. I can use systems administration, right? But the main thing that multiplies those, okay, teaching, because I've gone through the process of explaining it to somebody else, okay. Yeah, two people learn. That's exactly right. There's a Sam says when one person teaches, two people learn, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. And because you're in the cloud where there's so much to learn, everything you can find to multiply your learning is going to be beneficial. So teaching is one of these things. These are my levers. This is how I leverage myself into Azure. So when I first, one of the first things I did, besides working with AZ 900, was working with Azure Data Platform. I said, hey, I know about SQL over here. Hey, they've got Azure SQL Server. Hey, I can still use T-SQL. Hey, they still have tables and schemas, and all that stuff is the same. I'm handling backups differently. We're handling scaling differently. I had to learn that stuff, but I was able to apply most of what I knew. So SQL and PowerShell, and then being able to train and be able to teach were key levers for me. So I want you to be thinking right now about the levers. How do you get leverage in your cloud career? So if you're thinking about this, asking yourself this question, what do you know that's usable in many scenarios? What can you use? Pick a technology that you work with it's not, hey, I can only use this in one place, but I can use this in multiple scenarios. And then useful over the long term. So a lot of times technology will change so rapidly. I can't use my cold fusion skills anymore. Those went away. There's really nowhere I can use that. Yeah, okay, yes, maybe I've learned some basic programming, but I can't use those skills. But SQL, that's the only thing I learned in school in terms of technology that I'm still using. I'm lucky I'm able to use that long term. What are your skills that you have now or that you can invest in? If you're thinking about where you want to focus, which skills are going to be useful over the long term? Where can you use these in many different places? That's really the key, because the more places you can use it, the more leverage, the more capability you get. Hey, I spent 10 hours learning this, but now I can go work in 100 different places with SQL or with PowerShell, for example. So what are the high leverage technologies? And this, I'm going to come up to where asking you guys a question. For me, cloud command line. I'm really doubling down on this tool, and PowerShell kind of fits into the picture. It's not the only tool. There's also Azure CLI. You can run this on your own machine or in a workstation. I'll show you. I have it running in a cloud container, in a development container. You may have heard of GitHub code spaces, or something called Gitpod, where you can run this containerized environment, do development. I'm sure you've heard of Cloud Shell. You can access it from the portal, but you can run PowerShell and Azure CLI commands. That actually runs in a container. And I'm going to figure out a new way to click on. Whenever I press escape, it pops out. So that's really my favorite high leverage tool. But there's others, and I've already identified SQL, not just for relational databases. I can use a SQL API for Cosmos DB. Kusto query language. It's not exactly SQL, but the principles apply. It'll be very similar. So, and if anybody is working with Azure Monitor, anybody that wants to get into security, working with Azure Sentinel, you can leverage, you take your SQL knowledge and leverage it in KQL. I think infrastructure as code. If anybody's interested in working with that now, I'd love to hear from you. This is one of those levers. I think Terraform is especially interesting because it works in multiple providers. Bicep is very interesting because it's easier to work with than ARM, these Azure Resource Manager templates, but it's more, it's terse compared to ARM templates, easier to write, easier to work with. It supports coding, things like looping and variables, and it's a lot more of a pleasure to do infrastructure as code with when you're working natively in Azure. And I've also identified containers. So folks that are working with containerization. You can't even open up your web browser without hearing about Kubernetes. And Docker is the foundation of that. So if you spend time with containerization and Kubernetes, that's everywhere. That's how applications are going to be run. Gradually, our virtual machines are going to become less and less important as we see more and more applications running inside Kubernetes. So this is the moment I'll ask you guys, where are the other high leverage tools? Either one that you are using or ones that you might want to investigate into. Where are the high leverage tools in your mind? You can use the chat for that.
I'm not sure if it's the exact same thing that you're talking about. When I was watching some of the .NET Conf, I was really kind of interested in Orleans, which is their actor model system. It seems like it's the way that they're trying to just talk about building distributed .NET applications. I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah. If you have a link to put in the chat, I'd like to see this.
Sure. To the presentation or to just the Orleans project, or
I think he's dropping it in the chat. But yeah, that's interesting. The whole idea of the distributed applications was Dapper. I think there was.
Yeah, Dapper's pretty cool too. I haven't I play with it, but I checked it out, but that does seem like pretty interesting, to do too. I like that a lot. It just seemed like I always heard of Akka.net and being like the thing you do for this actor models, but it seemed like they were trying to really build these actor models into a concept of for building like a .NET application that works in distributed fashion without actually building it to be distributed. So you can scale and grow, which I thought was kind of interesting. So I still need to learn a lot more about it, but it's just something I think it could be an area where more and more people go. For all I know, it might be interesting to learn about. So but I'll post a link so everyone can see about it too.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you're kind of, it's probably a good bet. It's a bet that you're kind of weighing your probabilities. If I invest weeks in this, and if it goes for 5 years, okay, but if it goes for 10 or 20 years, hey, that's good. And you're kind of you're making your technology bet, so to speak. Yeah, so I think actually that sounds like a good one. I'd like to see what how popular it is in Azure, if that uptake keeps going up. A lot of folks have picked technologies and it got pulled into something else or got replaced. So yeah, you're having to make those kind of choices. ETL tools or ELT, yeah. So the things that you've invested, probably if you guys are familiar with DTS, that became SSIS, and now Data Factory. So working with Synapse Analytics it's a pipelines, and Azure Data Factory. That's those principles are the same. So you're still running SQL scripts. You're doing select statements to create tables and so forth. .NET, yeah, Maui. That's going to be big. I think some folks can reuse their XAML or their native WinForms knowledge with Maui. With some work to update it. Yeah, Orleans is interesting. Yeah, so these yeah, this is good. Actually, you know what? As I take a step back, programming is high leverage, right? So if you've got a ton of investment into C#, then picking up something like any of these tools you're gonna have a head start. You've got leverage there. Yeah, that's good. So be thinking about these, and share them with the group, and then be thinking, where am I? How much leverage is the tool that I have? So if you've got super high leverage with your tool, then you can do a lot. So you're more useful. You get more useful, you're going to be more in demand. You get paid better. You have better opportunities. You have more say in how you work. So my first question, and you guys are putting in the chat, and you write down your own notes. Think about what are your tech levers? Where are your strengths? Which technologies do you know that are the most leverage, that can give you the most options when you're working in the cloud? Let's see, leave it in the scope of Azure Cloud, and then, well, which ones would you like to master? So this is important for you to understand, but in terms of your career and where you're going. Be aware of that in your own career, because you kind of have to chart your course. If you don't, and you can you don't have to put all your eggs in one basket, but what you don't want to do is invest in a technology that then goes away or it shrinks in terms of market share and in usefulness. Like if I was just doing SQL on-prem and I wasn't doing Azure, then I know that area is going to gradually shrink. There's going to be more and more work moving to the cloud, and there'd be people that are not willing to change and update their skills. So I'll be competing with people like that instead of people who are ready to learn and are challenging themselves. Message-based applications. Yeah, I'd like to see link for this as well. That sounds like service-based architecture. Actually, that's new to me as well. Message-based, yeah, and the scalability. Yes, so yeah, you're catching. Yeah, so you're relating the things, the technologies that follow along with those models, those cloud architecture patterns. The technologies that support those architecture patterns are going to be more in use and more in demand. IoT, yeah, definitely IoT. Yeah, the stream analytics, yeah, those are taking off like a rocket right now. The data engineering roles that are coming up, they're just not going to have enough people that can do all the work with streaming data, IoT, security, machine learning, C# and SQL Server. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, SQL Server, now you get an Azure SQL. They just added the feature that you can call REST APIs from within your Azure SQL Server. I'm not sure about that, but they built in that capability. I think they released that this week when they talked about SQL 2022 at the PASS conference. So this is a bit of a tangent, but if you guys, you know what, there's a as I'm going into this, look up. If you have seen this, career internals, 300 something, whatever the most recent one. He does it every year. He talks about this. If you look this up on YouTube and watch this, talking about this technology and picking the right technology where your leverage is, he's got a really good take on it. I mean, I don't know of anybody who's mastered and leveraged SQL Server to the degree he has. And when he talks about, find an expensive piece of technology and then stand next to it. And basically, that's how you can succeed in your career. He's funny, but he's also right. So I want you to be thinking about that. So one of the things that I'm interested in my career here with this, combining the teaching and the working with PowerShell, where I think there's a lot of leverage. This is, I'm going to show you a Git pod. And this is a containerized development environment. So this is similar to Codespaces. So until recently, Git pod they would give you 50 hours of free service per month, and then before you had to pay. And Codespaces, you had to pay right out of the gate. So I liked this tool for creating a development environment, a learning environment for PowerShell. And just recently, like a week ago, Codespaces offered 60 hours a week of free service. So you can use Codespaces to do what I'm about to show you, as well as working with Gitpod. But the idea here, I'm going to show you a web-based version of Visual Studio Code that I'm eager to explore using this as a teaching tool, or maybe just as a convenience tool or infrastructure development tool, so that people can get productive real quickly working with PowerShell. So in a nutshell, and there's a lot here I want to do with this, and here's kind of a weird artifact I get when this starts up. It has a bunch of binary data. It shows up in the terminal down here. So it's a little bit unpolished. But when I run, I go to AZPS here, and I've got this concept where I would have people, create or start with existing scripts, then modify scripts like this, and I'm just setting up, my own settings file here, so anybody can put their own region or the name of their resource group and set those up. And then I'm setting up another one for my secrets. So we can pull secrets, let's say from an Azure vault. And once somebody has access to this, they can run a command and connect and log into their Azure account from here. So this is running in a browser. Okay, looks like Visual Studio Code. It's running in a browser. You can see down here, it's a container and I can see information about the CPU that's running in the container. I can authenticate to the portal here. I'm going to copy my code here, and I do Control-click on this link down here, and it'll log into my Azure portal. Paste this in here. I forgot to ask Joe, let me know how am I doing on time. So I think I've already into the first hour.
Yeah, it looks like you're pretty good on time so far. We normally go to about 8 o'clock Eastern.
Okay.
But you're not obligated to go that long, but that's how long we can go.
Okay.
Yeah. Steve's the wizard behind the curtain. So
Okay.
whatever he says.
All right, Steve, let me know if I'm, let me know if I'm running low on time, let's say within half an hour or something. Okay. So once I'm done, yeah, I'm good so far. This is open accessible. You can just go to, I can give you the URL to this, and you can basically put in a URL and make a copy of this. If you have a GitHub account, you authorize Gitpod to access your repository, and it spins up an environment you can play with here. And right now I've authenticated into my Azure environment, and my idea was, hey, if you work with Azure, and if you look at all of these really different, let me see, let's start here. I'm going to do get module az.star list available. And if I press F8, it's going to run that line that I have selected. If I maximize this, what I'm looking at now is all the different modules in PowerShell. And if you're familiar at all with Azure, you'll recognize that there's a module for every kind of service. Anything that Azure does, there's going to be a module that works with it. So not that I understand all of these technologies. I've worked with a handful of them, and some more than others. But some things like az.resources or az accounts, I'm using a lot. az.storage, az compute, that's where your virtual machines are. And each of these modules has a set of functionality that you can use to learn and work with that tool. So I'm playing around like with az accounts. Yeah, I can say, go ahead and show me all the commands with get command. So one of my first commands you learn with PowerShell, verb-noun get-command, az account. So if I press F8 here, it'll show me all of these commands, and I can see that all of these commands, again, it's all a bunch of verb-nouns. So that's a lot of commands, but I can kind of start sifting through it if I use some tools. And this is going to take those commands, it's going to group them. Make this, I can control plus and minus to zoom in and out. So maybe I can make this a little easier to read. Maybe I'm going to hide my files over here. So I can look at those commands, group it by the verb, and then I can sort based on the count, descending. So I like to say, what are the most popular verbs? Well, it looks like get, and then followed by some of these other ones here. Okay, well, there's lots of get commands. Okay, what about the most popular nouns? Looks az context. There's a lot of commands that work with az context, az config. So I'm kind of figuring out what's possible can I do. So if I run this get command and I filter it for the noun az account, this should show me all of the commands that work with accounts. So I just used connect az account to log in, but there's also other commands here. You'll notice that some of these are aliases, like alias for login. I actually happen to know that this is an alias for connect az account. Logout is an alias for disconnect. So there's commandlets and then aliases, which basically point to other commands. So I can start exploring and start figuring out what I can do here. I'm not going to go much further on this. I just want to kind of show kind of what I'm thinking about. And if I look at all of the get commands, get is the most common verb, and it's basically informational. It's like equivalent of select for SQL. So show me information. So here's all the things that I can get it to show me from my Azure accounts. So now I can start exploring. So I can learn about my easy environment, my subscription, my tenant. Okay. And so I can go look at my easy domain, let's say. All right, so I've set up my own name, davidcobb.net, and then my company, Cobb Information Technology, so I can go and look at that. So as I'm exploring this, I'm getting familiar with Azure, but I'm using PowerShell to figure it out. And hopefully, you know, as I drill into this more and more, eventually I can find useful things to do, maybe scripts, and maybe I can do inventory. So starting to play around with, you know, maybe exploring using easy resources, maybe doing inventory of resources, working with storage and networking and compute, then eventually maybe set up some simple projects for people to learn. So this is, you know, I'm thinking about leveraging PowerShell to be able to learn more. So I'm hoping that you guys will find that interesting as well, and can geek out about PowerShell at some point in the future, maybe. So those are the levers, and I like everybody's answers. That was really good. But thinking about that in terms of your career, what are your levers now? What are the levers you want to learn? Where are you going? Now, action for I specified forcing factors as one of the other topics. I looked this up, and actually, it was the better term for this is action forcing mechanisms. So what can you put in your life, or what can you put into a system, or what can you put in somebody's environment that's going to force them to do some behavior that's good for them, right? What's going to force you to act on this, to learn and to grow? What's going to, you know, if you're like me, you know, unless you have something forcing you to do something, you know, at the end of the day, I'm done. I don't, you know, I worked, I earned my money, I did my job. You know, I'm going to go hang out with the kids, or I'm going to go watch Netflix, or I'm going to go, you know, have a beer. I don't want to do anything. But if I know I want the outcome, what can I do to force myself to move towards that outcome? And, you know, what is that for your life, right? So you're here, you're in a meetup, you showed up to learn Azure, you forced yourself, hey, I'm going to show up. I told the guys I'd be there, I'm going to be there. Now you're here to learn, right? Maybe this is inspiring to you. You know, maybe one day you're exactly, you know, you're going to go and help out. You're going to study with other people, the connection. How did you know that? And it's hard to express how much value there is there. Holly, Joe, I know a few others are in that DP 500 study group, and I know that Sam was part of the AZ 900 study group for the storage account. There's so many reasons, and if you're not in part of a group, just a buddy. Hey, we're both needing to learn. Hey, we can keep each other accountable. Having somebody else, you know what? I would take a nap, but you know what? I told them I'd be there, so I'm going to go. Instead of taking a nap, I'm going to go study. And that's huge. You need that. You know, we're human. Scheduling exams, you know, putting this on the calendar, put the money on your credit card, put it on the calendar. Hey, you spent the money. Now you're going to go and take that exam. Maybe put it a month, 2 months, 3 months in advance. Put it on the calendar. Oh, all these other things came up too. I wanted to kind of slowly preview these. But all of these different things are things that people commit to. And it's hard and it sucks. And you might think, oh, why did I commit to doing this article? Why do I commit to writing this article? This is tough. Making a class, teaching people. It's all going to benefit you. It's hard and it's stressful sometimes, and things don't always go well. But you're challenging yourself in order to learn and in order to grow. So what have you done for yourself? And if you might look at this and say, you know what, I can't do all those things. There's no way I can do all that stuff. Things that I have to do are overwhelming. I like this picture. I found this on LinkedIn. I didn't see the attribution on it. So if anybody knows, I'm happy to share the attribution. Steve says they're looking for speakers. If you've never spoken before, there's few things you can do for your career that are going to benefit you as much as working up the courage to speak and to put a presentation together. It doesn't have to be like this one of these long presentations. There's often lightning talks where people will say, hey, we're going to have 2 hours. We need 8 people to sign up. Everybody talks for 15 minutes. Or maybe you team up with somebody else. So you both share. So if one of you freezes up, the other person can pick up the ball, and you can work through it together. And but finding a way to just get out and share what you know. If it's daunting, a lot of times it's the things that you've already done. You don't think about those things. The things that are behind this little character here, this person's done all this stuff. You've done all these things. You've earned a living in technology. You've fed your family. You've overcome all sorts of challenges in your life to get as far as you are now. And then you're looking at this next thing and you think, oh, this is impossible. I can't do that. But you're not seeing it in the perspective of all the things you have done. So, and I thought about, oh yeah, that when I was a 24-year-old kid, and I'd never had a real IT job, and I wanted to succeed, and so I did this hard thing, and things went south, and I still managed to make it work. And that challenge has helped me to this day. So, being aware of your challenges, what you've already done, seeing it in those perspectives is going to help you to take on the next challenge. So, I want you to take on those challenges. And I was thinking about trying to turn this into some kind of mystery. How do you study? And everything you study is different, but I'm going to break it down. This is a general process, and I encourage you to do this as much as you can. There's 3 parts to any study approach. And if you're putting off studying, you should be studying. If you want to grow, challenging yourself, give yourself better options, give yourself more income. All of these things, starts with learning. So there's 3 parts. So if you're going to learn the theory, you can get Microsoft Learn right now is the best source, and it's just gotten so much better, and it continues to get better. So and Microsoft, that's free. YouTube is free, and you can pay for online courses. And a lot of times, online courses, even though you're spending money, hey, I don't want to spend money, but you get better in terms of your time. Maybe you're spending more money to save time. Maybe you're spending money to save a little bit of hassle, and you want something presented to you or distilled for you. So that money is going to save you time and effort. So sometimes it makes sense to spend money. You have your time, your money, and your effort. So sometimes that's the most effective. I'm an MCT. I would at some point love to talk to you guys about, hey, here's everybody who really likes to learn and teach other people, could at least consider becoming an MCT. It's extra work, and there's a yearly cost, especially if you're working with an organization that supports you. You get access to a lot of cool resources, so I can download PDFs and read about these things. But the information on Microsoft Learn and what I'm getting in my MCT resources, there's these days Microsoft Learn is just so much better. I don't know. I would think that I still think that you still get a lot of benefit in terms of what you can access in terms of learning as an MCT, but the free stuff and the things that are available online is really good. So, so you have your theory, you have your hands-on, and you can't skip this. You got to do it. If you want to do GitHub labs, you can build it yourself. You have to have your own Azure account. You have to have some basic technology troubleshooting skills to set these lab environments up. But every lab for every certification is on GitHub, and they give it away for free under an MIT license. Or you can pay lab providers. So we set up a little under $70 to set up a lab. You can have access to it for 6 months for any class. And then there's other things where you get subscription models. Some of you work for large organizations, like there's an Electronic Skills Initiative or ESI. You get labs, you get access to that for free for big organizations. So there's ways to get to the labs that are easier to work with. And then the practice tests. And this, for me, the more I take tests, the more I spend time, instead of having to study everything, every time I take a test, I already know a lot of it. So I just want to find out what I don't know. The reason I take practice tests, the reason you're going to take practice is not because you can do well to make yourself feel good. Hey, I know things. You're taking the practice tests, and there's different ones for different costs. My preferred one is Whiz Labs. I like Measure Up for the quality, but the cost is really high. I basically have to spend like $100 for any exam I wanted to take. Whereas WizLabs, you can get a subscription, or you can purchase the thing outright for like, usually under $20. You can get hundreds of questions, not as necessarily good questions, and maybe they're a little unfair or they might be out of date, but there's a lot of them. And you want to be challenged by the question. You want to get questions that show you what you don't know, and then you look at the answers and you go and study and you go follow that link and you do the research. And every time you miss a question on a practice test, all right, write down the thing that you just learned. You save that bookmark and you research that. You're showing all of your gaps, and the test helps you fill in your gaps. So combining the theory and the hands-on, the test prep, and how you do this for each individual exam can be different for everybody, but this is the fundamentals. And Tim Warner, I think, like he put out this three-legged stool approach. The theory, the hands-on, and the test prep. And it's totally a valid way to prefer. So yeah, what I'm using is WizLabs. And actually in Microsoft Learn, you have quizzes, you have like knowledge checks. So you have basic quiz questions, but the practice tests give you more close to real world actual exam questions. So I'm using WizLabs more. But if you have ESI, and if you are part of a large organization, the Electronic Skills Initiatives, they give these away for free. People can sign up in a large organization and get certifications paid for because they're a big Microsoft customer. I already went through all that. All right, so did you know that there's multiple exam bonus points for Microsoft? Did you know, what if I told you, you get 10% bonus. Each time you pass an exam, the next exam, they're gonna give you 10% free points. The more tests you pass, the easier the next one is. Microsoft does this for you. No, they don't actually do that. I'm making this up. But the effect is still there, where each time you take a test and you pass, so if I took AZ 104 exam, and then later on I go to take DP 300, I'm going to see a lot of the same concepts. I'm going to see role-based access control. I'm going to see resource groups. I'm going to have to think about availability zones and regions. There's overlap in the content. Actually, when I took AZ 500, I had already covered most of the material because I'd already passed the AZ and Azure administration and the architecture. So a lot of the concepts were already covered. I only had to study a couple things, and I was able to pass that exam, barely, but I was able to pass because there's so much overlap. So the more you learn, the easier this gets, right? So Joe and Polly are both working on the DP 500. I know they did the DP 300, the equivalent for Power BI. They've already studied Power BI and they're familiar with that. So that whole portion of the DP 500 exam, they've got a lot of that covered already. So you're going to be able to apply more concepts in the future. So I needed a better way to illustrate this. I couldn't think of it. So I just thought about the imaginary bonus points for Microsoft. The more exams you take, the more free points you get. It's not really true, but a lot of times I'm able to ask, even though I'm not totally familiar with the question, I know enough from my experience with prior exams that I can answer and get them right. Okay, you're seeing the patterns. And those patterns apply in the tests and in the real world Azure. So when I pick up a new technology, I already know how PowerShell works for this technology. I can pretty much guess how it's going to work over here. I understand role-based access control. Okay, how does role-based access control work for this new technology that I'm learning? And a lot of folks, I think, are afraid to fail an exam. So they might study, they might overstudy, they might put it off indefinitely. And I'm just not ready. I'm just not ready. I don't want to fail. But you know what? Here's the thing. The truth is, it happens. Sometimes you're going to fail. When that happens, here's what you do. I've failed a few times. A lot of times I'll take an exam before I'm ready, knowing I'm probably going to fail. And every once in a while, I'm surprised and I squeak by. But if I fail, I walk out of there, okay, I didn't know this, I didn't know this, they asked me about this thing. And that first hour after you walk out of the class, out of the exam, you just write down everything you didn't know. And that's your study guide. Go and learn all those things and hopefully get hands-on with those things. So where there's a feature, you learn about it, you read about it, you do it in a lab, and then immediately reschedule, immediately get back on the horse. A lot of times you can set up, there's a free retry. You can get, if you look up the Microsoft certification exam offers, they'll give you the free retake. And that should help you get over that hump. What I do see is people get paralyzed. Like, I'm not going to go take this test until I'm sure I'm going to pass. And that's just a way to waste your time. You know, you only need a 700 to pass. If you study until you get 1,000, you know, then maybe that was time you could have spent better somewhere else on some other exam. Just keep retaking it. There's nobody, when you pass an exam, nobody cares that you took it 3 times and failed. Okay, you go and take it again. That's it. So question for you, you know, in terms of Azure, you know, if it's overwhelming, think about what you already accomplished. You've gotten this far. And then, you know, what commitments can you make right now to improve your own Azure cloud career? I'll give you guys a second to think about this. I'm gonna share it in the chat, that's fine. But I really want you to share it for yourself. What can you do in terms of commitment to improve, you know, to move in the right direction in your career? And here's the big one. Okay, what have you been putting it off? What have you been putting off because, oh, that's too hard. I'm not ready. I'll do something else. I'll do something easier. I'm not ready to do this yet. What are you putting off? Because it seems too hard. You know that, at least in the abstract, you know that doing these hard things is going to help you. Higher score makes you more knowledgeable. Answer questions. Yeah, fair enough. A lot of times when I'm answering questions, especially the first time I teach a class, I'm just doing so much research and I'm reading and I'm looking things up. After I've taught it once or twice, a lot of times I'm looking up the answer and sharing the answer with them in the books online for 2 reasons. One, maybe I forgot it, or maybe I'm wrong. And 2, maybe it's changed. So by showing them how I get the answer and verifying, yep, I was right, or no, it's actually this now. So what was it the other day? There was Kubernetes containers you can connect to what kind of storage. There was different choices. One of them was Azure files. One of them was premium disk. And the answer that the test had was Azure files. So container and Kubernetes can connect to persistent storage and Azure files. But they added a new feature. Kubernetes can connect to premium storage disks as well. They added that since they came out with this question in the practice exam. So that question was out of date. And by looking up the answer, I realized, oh, it's this now. That's the nature of the cloud. So you look, you know, trust but verify. You know, hey, I think I know the answer, but I'm going to look it up. And here's where I looked up. Yep, it's still like this. So a big part of this, at some point, I should think about, you know, how to, the way we learn things now in the cloud, because it's changing so much, it's more valuable to say, rather than try to memorize the answer, it's more valuable to say, hey, I know how to search for that and find it in books online or find it in Azure documentation. That's actually more reliable than knowing the answer in some situations, because eventually the answer is going to change. That's the cloud. So, you know, write this down. This is for you. I don't care. I don't need to know the answer. You know, what can you do to commit in this, in terms of study, in terms of, I'm thinking in terms of certification, but just in terms of study, where do you want to go? And then filters. So this is a big one. Homework. This is not for now. This is probably pretty private. And you can actually spend a lot of time. This is one of these personal journey, self-development things that really was really relevant during the COVID pandemic for me. This is a challenge for you, for anybody, you know, to think about every input that you accept, especially scrolling things on social media, you know, video, what are you watching? What are you scrolling? What are you looking at on the internet? There's 2 categories. What is helping you, inspiring you, informing you? What's motivating? What's lifting you up? And what's pissing you off? What's making you angry? What scares you? What's discouraging? You know, what's distracting you from what you should be doing, right? And imagine keeping track of everything that you go look at over the next week and putting it into one of these 2 categories. You know, if you were ideal, perfect person, everything would be, well, it's not, everyone's perfect, but most of the time you should be having input that's in that first category. It's what's helping you. What are you doing with your time and your focus and your attention that's actually helping you, is teaching you something, that's encouraging you, because if you're doom scrolling, okay, God, especially in the morning, if you're looking at the news and all that stuff, the emails and all of the social media things, the first hour or two of your day is going to be totally different than if you focus on uplifting stuff. So this was important for me. I was making a big change. I had to put a filter on, like my camera. Like there's this lens. I just kind of put this thing in front of my face, so to speak, and I connected in with community. So where am I going to go find knowledge and encouragement for this process that I'm doing? So Cloud Skills, they've been purchased by INE now. Mike Pfeiffer was one of these guys who really did a great job of making it seem possible to learn Azure. There was he did a DevOps boot camp. I was able to go attend that boot camp and connect with the people who are learning this thing. You have community meeting and people that were working through the labs and things, helping each other. And it was really my first glimpse of how the community could help people learn. And I didn't know that I could do this. I thought I could, maybe I could do this, but it seemed like there's so much to learn, and this made it possible. And community, anybody, you find environments like this, and this user group that you're in, this is another place like that. It makes it possible. You're connecting with other people who are already doing this. Somewhere in this meeting, if you're thinking about moving into some aspect of the cloud, there's probably somebody in this meeting that is already there. I see Darius. Darius is there. He's been one of those people for me. He made me. Darius is part of my community, and Polly as well down in South Florida. I don't see anybody else down in South Florida. But when I was making this transition, from regular IT to cloud IT, he's one of those people in the community that said, you can do it. You already know enough. You're ready. You don't have to do a lot more. You're ready to do this, and that support is essential. You're not doing this alone. So I've got great user groups. Actually, started with Microsoft Cloud South Florida user group. We did a handful of presentations before COVID, and right now it's kind of laying fallow. Maybe we'll bring that back up one day. But there's a lot of good user groups there in South Florida that have been they were supportive for my career before I got into the cloud, but especially since then. So and not just showing up. A lot of people are going to show up into the community, and if you're passive and you're just showing up, figure out a way to volunteer, figure out a way to do, put input in. You're going to get it back in terms of skill, in terms of confidence. So that's been a filter. So that's, hey, I'm hearing just from this direction, right? I'm also hearing from podcast audiobooks. I'm just picking the inputs that were helpful to me. I was picking inputs, listening to people that I respected, people that are accomplishing things. I don't need to hear negging. I don't need to hear complaining. I don't need to hear that other stuff. And then Azure videos. Every time you have your high energy time where you're studying and you can work on things, maybe you're low energy or in between things. Instead of watching Netflix, I'm watching an Azure video. Maybe also connecting into some online training and things like that. But good inputs. So, and all this stuff out. I just turn off the news. Look, if something's changing in the world that I need to know about, my wife will tell me, or somebody will tell me about it. I just tuned it all out. And this was amazingly helpful during the pandemic. And not that I totally tuned out, the high level things I would connect into, but my day to day was not to focus on these things. Everything that every 5 minutes, every hour, every thing that you can rescue from all of the junk is going to make room in your life for something better. So you have to focus on something that can actually change, something that's actually in your control. So anything that's out there that's pissing you off, that's out of your control, filter that out, focus on what you can control. You can work and you can learn. So, this is for you as well. Where are your inputs you should filter out? What are the inputs you should tune into? And then once you do that, what's that going to make room for? Is it more studying? Is it, building that side project you've been thinking about? What are you going to be able to do once you've made that shift or make that change? And you probably can't even imagine, but you're going to make room in your life by making, changing your filter. There's no limit to how much bad news is out there. There's no limit to, I don't want to get into it. As much as you can find, you can find bad stories, but you can also focus on the good and what you can control. So then my last section here, 30 minutes, okay, thank you. So I should have some time left. So what is a cloud expert really? So what does it really take to be a cloud expert? Okay, in my opinion, there's people that know so much more than me. I've been able to focus on teaching the basics. So people who are just starting out, here's the basics of administrating, here's the basics of development. So that learning path and all those certifications I have, I think that's just the starting gate. I look at it like, man, I'll never know as much of these MVPs. I'll never know as much of these Microsoft people who know this stuff so deeply. But at the same time, I know enough to help a beginner. I'm teaching people, if the smartest, deepest Microsoft knowledge, let's say, goes from 0 noob to 5 expert, as somebody who's got lots of certifications, I'm focusing in on level 1 and level 2 for most things. But that's helpful for a lot of people. Okay, I can help a lot of people with this information, although there's a ton of stuff I'll never know. There's a ton of depth. There's a lot more things that in Azure that I don't know and I won't know. I'm gonna do now. And that's true for everybody. So you can always think about what you don't know, but just also think about, you're further along the path now than you used to be, and you're further along the path now than somebody else who's learning. There's somebody who wants to be able to even break into the cloud. There's somebody that wants to even get into the industry that you're in, and they wonder how they can get there. Okay, and that happens by somebody who's just further along, sharing what they know. Right, I'm in one of these certifications or one of these paths, one of these areas, I might know more because I just spent more time in this area, and I'll share it with people who are starting. And that's an expert. Somebody who just took AZ900 and passed it and goes back to the office, hey, I passed AZ900. Hey, tell me about Azure. What is Azure? And that person who just learned AZ900 can tell that person who's brand new something that's useful. Azure fundamentals is going to be useful to somebody who doesn't know the fundamentals, who's just starting out. And just like everything else that we learn, you're just sharing it with people who are behind you in the path, or they're coming up. So kind of rounding this thing out, there's this really cool concept, ikigai. I'm not even sure how to say this. This is a Japanese word, but I'm thinking about all of this Azure stuff in the context of the hero's journey or life journey, or like where are we in our career and in our life? Not just to work, not just because technology is cool and we're getting paid to do it, which is awesome. You get paid to play with computers. That's I'm always going to be grateful for that. But I'm also thinking about work in the context of like the bigger picture in life, and one of the really cool concepts out here for this ikigai is a combination of 4 things. And what you're looking for in life, and according to this concept, is if you figure out all these 4 things, what you're good at, what you love, what you get paid for, and what the world needs. So if you get 1 or 2 of these things, if you have something you're good at and you get paid for, that's your profession. You get paid for it and the world needs it, that's your vocation. The world needs it and you love it, well, that's a mission. You love it and you're good at it, it's a passion. But you're trying to zoom in, you're trying to get to the center place. And I really love this idea. I'm shooting for this. I would like to get here, in my time here, and I'm hoping that that's an appealing idea for you. So I'm good at this. I can pick up technology. I'm good at that. And I like helping other people succeed. And I'm hoping maybe some of you do too. You like to see that light come on for people when they figure things out. You're sharing what you learn. And people are going to need this. Everything's moving to the cloud, where there's not going to have enough people to meet the demand. So that's why our salaries are going up in the cloud. That's why you see all these people banging on your door and calling you at weird hours and sending you emails to fill out some cloud development role. We need it. We need more people that can build things in the cloud and teach it in the cloud, not just work with the technology, but teach people. and you can get paid for this. So I'm zoning in on this. I think this is pretty great, and I hope that you find that interesting as well, because we're tying the value of giving things to other people, but things that we love to do, the world needs it, and we get paid for it. Then I think I'm pretty close to this. I like to get closer, and I'm going to continue to move closer on this. So think about this. Who has guided you or inspired you? So my community, people that have been in my community, people I've worked with too. I didn't even get into people that have helped me in my career along the way. And then what are you doing to share what you've learned? And if you're just listening and just learning, I challenge you to get over your fear and get out of your comfort zone and share what you learned. It could be a small way, it could be a big way. The person in the next cube over or somebody on your team, who can you help? Who can you teach? And that reward that comes from that maybe helps you find, whatever your ikigai is. So take action, do something with this. Feedback form, fill out a form. That's what you can do. That's your action. We need to know what you thought about this, and I really need feedback. I need critical feedback. There's, what would you see? What would you like to see? What was confusing? What would like to hear more of? What would you like to hear less of? I talked about some different technologies here. Anybody here want to hear more about PowerShell? Anybody want to do some learning Azure with PowerShell? Let Steve, let Joe know. Maybe we'll do something like that. Maybe I'll do like an alpha version of that class. That's one of the things that I've been putting off. Actually, I've been kind of intimidated by it. And then what's the next step of your cloud journey? So reach out on the forum, reach out to me. Also, I love to connect with people on LinkedIn. LinkedIn.com. I should put it in the chat. This is me on LinkedIn, and I'm experimenting with posting ideas and communicating, helping people to learn and finding useful things to help people with their Azure career, with their cloud careers. So I would love it if you connected. Trying to build an audience, whatever that is. I think really it's just about connecting with other people who are who can help me or who I can help. I'm trying to figure out where it is I fit. I'm at the point now where I'm making good living, and I don't have to push to make a living anymore. So the direction now I'm pushing is what am I doing? What is rewarding? What's useful that I can do? So any questions?
David, This is Joe. I do have a question. So there's a lot of training resources on the web, as you mentioned, YouTube and various other resources. So what, in your mind, what do you do to stand out?
All right, this is only because it's the cloud and it's moving so fast. I think it's really Microsoft Learn. Here, let me show you this. If I go to GitHub, excuse me. Excuse me. You know what? I didn't cough the whole time I was talking, so make my throat's real dry. But there's the problem with any online course. I mean, there's a lot of great Cloud Guru, Pluralsight, Cloud Skills. There's a handful. There's so many that are so good. But as soon as it comes out, it starts to age. And every time you take one of those courses, you need to know, hey, is this current? Am I going to have to update what I'm learning? When I look at Microsoft Learning, I'll pick like AZ 104. Okay, this is the and there's a GitHub repo for every Microsoft exam. This is updated 10 hours ago. Okay, there's been 919 commits. This has over 100 contributors. So it's changing, and this is changing as rapidly as the technology is changing. So more often than not, I'm using Microsoft Learn and the docs and behind all of these things is GitHub as my source. And I'm not using I've not been using other things, and I do have access to things like PDFs and extra information as MCT. They sometimes have trainer materials, but it's all based on what's in here. So this is, I think this is the best source for the learning. Lena, thank you. Yeah, and as I'm working through this, I'm trying to, at the same time, like I take notes and I try to keep things. I got VS Code here open. I'm kind of, as I'm working through this, like I'm learning and building my own little documentation sometimes in VS Code, saving it in Markdown, like keeping my notes so I can search these, find these in the Git repository. But yeah, Microsoft Learn and the labs that you go through here are super valuable. And then either I'm doing the GitHub labs or like we looked at for the group, the lab environment that's based on what's in GitHub from a provider like Scalable or Extreme Labs for hands-on work. Yeah. I think we're going to see more and more that it's just going to be such a hard thing. The company with the most incentive to keep the documentation up to date is going to be Microsoft.
Right. I mean, that's one thing Microsoft's always been very, very good at is providing plenty of resources to learn, right? Way back from the beginning. I spent a little stint in my career working for SAP in an SAP environment, and you couldn't find anything to learn. If you didn't want to go to a class and sit in a room, they weren't going to tell you anything. I mean, maybe I'm overstating that, but that's just the way it felt to me after the tremendous amount of resources that I was used to from Microsoft. And the best way to appreciate all the great resources Microsoft gives you is to try to learn technology where they don't, like SAP.
Yeah, they're hiding it, right? Yeah, they're kind of they want to charge you for the knowledge. They want to lock you into it, like you're dependent on them and their consultants to do the work, as opposed to wanting to educate you. Yeah. And comparing it to AWS, although AWS is catching up, as is Google with the documentation and the story for learners. But most of the stuff I look up at AWS, when I go look it up, it's for somebody that already knows how it works, like as opposed to somebody who's brand new. YouTube is really good. Anything from John Saville has been great. But it's crazy. He's so good, and it's free, and he doesn't monetize it. He's just giving back. YouTube stuff is just phenomenal. And he's a machine. He's just got such good personal discipline, and he's really open about how his day-to-day life. So the quality there is fantastic.
Hey David, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you sound good.
Great. Yeah, I just want to say thanks for the talk. It was very inspiring, really, and I've been trying to kind of get on this journey as well to doing it. So it was just really good to hear your perspective on it. So thanks a lot. And I also just wanted to ask, you're talking about levers. What would you say? You've done .NET, like so C# and PowerShell. Which one would you say was a more useful lever for you in your career? And is there much demand for PowerShell training and stuff like that you see?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, easy. It's easy. I would say easily PowerShell, and you can expand that a little bit to say anything cloud command line, right? So it's totally okay to use PowerShell and mix in some Azure CLI, or to mix in some other command line tools, like I'm using PowerShell to deploy, or like a PowerShell script to deploy Terraform or something like that. This is the Windows terminal running the Azure Cloud Shell. I use this all the time, and it's not just PowerShell. Oh, this is Bash, PWSH. Now I'm in PowerShell. So if I were to pick one skill, it's going to be like the biggest multiplier for the cloud. It's either going to be PowerShell. You know what? I step back and think about it from a programmer perspective. Probably, programming language like C# or Go. If you're starting out from the gate, maybe Go or Python, one of those languages from the developer side. But from my perspective, like there's so many things that I can do inside of the Cloud Shell ecosystem. PowerShell being the main. So PowerShell is the shell where I'm running these commands, and then there's a set of PowerShell modules. But within this shell, I can, do AZ and AZ find. Hey, I need to do something with. Oh gosh, I don't know. Distributed. I don't know. I'm guessing right now. But I can go and look up the commands in Azure CLI. Oh, okay, there's a way I can work with distributing my traffic with Azure Web App. So I can search through the help and use this Azure CLI command in the context of PowerShell. Okay, and Terraform is in here, and Docker is in here. TF, I think TF is in here. I thought it was. This is Terraform, yeah, TF. So there's a whole lot of tools that they include into the Cloud Shell. So I'm kind of expanding my interest to Cloud Shell, but if you had to pick one, I would just say, yeah, PowerShell is probably the most leverage, or a programming language of your choice. Like Python, I think is more general purpose. I think Go for building applications, cloud native application. I think I've seen a lot of that activity there. For that, I'd be looking at like Stack Overflow and job posts, and those, you see those charts where they see the popularity of different languages. And that's where I would focus to figure out what's the most useful.
Yeah. And did you ever think about like doing a course or teaching PowerShell like as a program?
Yeah, if you guys all scream at Steve and Joe, hey, we really want them to do more of that stuff. I would do like a beta version of this class with learning Azure with PowerShell. So you kind of learn PowerShell along the way as you are exploring Azure with the PowerShell tools. I think that's really neat. And then, there's tons of ways to learn PowerShell just without the cloud component, just the syntax and working with the script. Everybody's classic is the month of lunches, PowerShell books. But there's so many good ways to learn PowerShell. Well, I think mostly you get in there with the basics, get a book like this, but solve a problem. Like I was looking at the documentation, watching some YouTube videos, and I had to write a script that would take the backups from production. It would iterate over all the backups and restore them onto the development machine. And that was my first PowerShell task. And that took me weeks to do. But then after that, I had a pretty good base grasp of the basics. And, just pick a problem. After you get through the basics here, get through the basics and then solve it. But everything that you look up how to do in the documentation, there's a PowerShell way to do everything. And they'll show you PowerShell, they'll show you CLI. A lot of times they'll show you how to do things in Bicep or some of these other tools. Azure Create VM, let's say. Create a VM. And you can kind of get a hint from here. If I look at, here's a quick start how to create a virtual machine. And then they show you, okay, here's how you do it in PowerShell. but also the command line interface, which is useful in Bash or PowerShell shell. Of course, the portal, bicep and arm. You're going to be seeing that most of the time. So what I think is interesting is you have, infrastructure as code. So bicep, this is one of these big deals. You get good at bicep. That's a lot of leverage. But for my money, PowerShell and CLI. I'm not really going to pick. If I have to pick, I'll pick this one, but I use both. But yeah, I do have an idea to teach the PowerShell. I got this thing is messy. I'm gonna clean that up. But I feel like there's some potential here with this. But I got to get people over the fear of it. Somebody looks at this and goes, I see the eyes glaze over.
So Dave, am I hearing you say that it could be a whole nother presentation of just how to administer Azure with PowerShell?
Yeah, I wouldn't do hands-on though. I want to do let's do like a half-day thing. And everybody has to have a GitHub account and has to have access to an Azure account. So we have to figure that part out. But then everybody comes in and has a file like this, and you can connect to their own Azure environment. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. I think eventually, once or twice I've been able to get my own students, like professionally. Like I had taught a group of people at AZ 104. I got my own students. Eventually, I'd love to be able to. And I'll do like a free thing for the user groups and beta test things, and then say, hey, here's people that I've taught, and here's what they had to say, and then I can go out there into the market and say, hey, would you like this? Join my PowerShell for Azure cohort class, and so have a balance of giving it away for free and putting it out there. Here's the instructions on GitHub if you want to do it yourself. And then, here I'll go teach this some stuff for free for the user groups, or maybe get a corporate sponsor. Get a company to sponsor like a half-day thing. I'm thinking about ways to make that happen.
So I want to jump in here quick too. In our last 5 minutes, Cecilia, I think you're on here. You want to speak up and introduce yourself? Oh, but no mic. Oh. Okay, so Cecilia is, I wish you could have a mic because you do this much better than I would. Cecilia is the force behind the study group that David has mentioned, the DP 500 study group that I'm a part of, as well as George Kowalski from DuPont and quite a few others. We have people in this study group even from other countries. I think we have someone from Australia, right? I just was hoping to give Cecilia a chance to plug her company because she's the one who's put the motivation behind this, even put some of her own money behind this study group, and it's really a great group. We're going over several months. The way she has it structured is awesome. We have a Teams group that she set up, and every week we meet every Saturday for an hour and a half to 2 hours. Each person has to present one topic from that week's portion of the Microsoft Learn for the certification. So you have to learn something, at least one piece of it in depth, and present to the rest of the group. We have homework in that we have to create a couple of certification style questions every week from the material that we've presented. And it's just, there's, you must have your video camera on, and so that way we feel like we're in the same room together. And obviously there's attendance requirements. If you miss more than 2, you're dropped from the group. So she really has figured out how to make an effective study group work. And that's how I met David. That's how we had this discussion about having a presentation like this. I'd like to think I know a good presentation when I hear it, and I think I did. So I'm very happy that David was willing to put this together and do this for us. This is the first time this has been done, right, David?
Yeah. I was experimenting on you, and you were okay with that, which was, I really needed. I needed that room. I kind of needed the room to try something new. So yeah, I really appreciate it. Yeah.
All right. And I think we are just about at time here. So thank you very much, David. It was a great presentation. The link to the feedback survey is in the chat. I will also send that out via email if you happen to miss it flying by. I will leave that open for about 24 hours. So tomorrow night, about 8 p.m. Eastern, I will close that and then get a summary of the results off to you, David.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, copy of the presentation. Yeah, okay. I can get the slides together for this. I have it printed out, but I'm going to print it again because there's a few slides I cut out at the end. So I'll put the PDF together.
Okay.
Sounds great.
And then we can make that available as part of the meeting. So on our website, on the meetup.com.
Absolutely.
Wow, thanks, guys. That was great.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of your evening.